Welcome to the mental meanderings of an aging Christian. This project began as a retirement idea that I had more than 20 years ago to put together perhaps a piece of writing addressing the questions of who are we, where do we come from, and where are we going. After many attempts, I ended up with the development of this set of slides as a kind of beginning effort. And so I will proceed from there. This simply is an introductory page, and it is done basically to share my thoughts and to stimulate your thinking on the themes of who are we as humans, what are our origins, where do we come from, and what does the future hold for us? Where can we possibly be going? Enjoy. This presentation is divided into 3 parts. Part 1 examines the theme of where we are now. Part 2 examines the theme of where do we come from. And Part 3 addresses the combination of my beliefs and speculations concerning where we may be going. In looking at where we are now, Part 1 addresses life in an age of rapidly accelerating change. It is to be noted that these reflections on where we are now is far from exhaustive. It is simply a quick opening to several aspects of the world, the universe in which we live. Next slide. The slides that follow present a collage of rapidly escalating change in the beginning decades of the 21st century. Perhaps the best single-word description of these changes is found in the word exponential. Technically, it is a mathematical concept, but it is also used to explain growth that is increasing at a continually accelerating rate. This is a fundamental characteristic of so many changes that we are currently experiencing. If you examine even briefly the graphic representations in the slides that follow, the exponentiality of change in our day becomes increasingly clear. An obvious question that arises from these examples is whether this exponential change and growth will continue at its constantly accelerating pace. Perhaps we are only in the beginning of these current expressions of exponentiality, these explosive expressions of human energy in the current world. And if so, it would seem that we live on the cusp of the birth of a radically new and different world. Next slide, please. The first slide in this section gives graphic expression to the approximate number of persons living on Earth in selected years since 1700. It is to be noted that it took approximately the year 1800 for the population of the world to reach 1 billion people. Approximately 130 years later, it doubled to 2 billion and by 1974 reached 4 billion. 8 billion people are predicted to live on Earth by the year 2024, and current projections are that the population of the Earth will level off at between 9 and 10 billion by the year 2050. One comparison that I found interesting is that the number of cells in the human brain is estimated to be roughly around 10 billion. We are now approaching, on a global level, 10 billion humans. This comparison is interesting in relation to the concept of global consciousness, with each person being considered a cell in the global brain, thus giving global consciousness the same proportions as are found in the consciousness functioning of an individual person. Such thinking fits well with Gaia hypothesis supporters. Many people hold that our globe is now becoming too crowded, and there are concerns about the sustainability of current or even modestly expanded human numbers. Another perspective is that in fact the population of the Earth may continue to grow, as through space travel locations for human habitation are continually expanded. Next slide, please. This slide presents changes in global life expectancy from 10,000 BCE to 2003 AD. It is noteworthy that on average, the years of life expected at birth remained constant, from about 10,000 BC to about 1600. The bar graphs located at the lower left corner of the slide depict average life expectancy through history, with a projection of expectancy crossing 100 by 2300. This prediction seems modest. For example, my mother is currently 100 years old. She lives in a nursing home with 30 residents. 6 of these persons are now over the age of 100. Global life expectancy has increased very rapidly in the last 400 years and continues to rise. While a variety of catastrophes could bring an abrupt end to the current pattern, there is an optimistic position concerning our continuing ability to move life expectancy forward. Technological advances, embracing cyborgs and transhumanism, may also bring reconsideration of the whole life expectancy paradigm. Next slide, please. World per capita gross domestic product, GDP, that is inflation adjusted over the last 2,000 years is presented. Many factors that are key elements in the modern age are contributors to this exponential change and continued acceleration. This is a study in its own right. This graph parallels the pattern of reduced to abject poverty in the world, with some predictions estimating eradication being possible within the next decade. Next slide. The knowledge doubling curve of Buckminster-Fuller is presented here as the underpinnings of exponential change today. The graph begins in 1 AD showing a 1-unit estimation of human knowledge acquired since the emergence of humans. This unit doubled in the next 1500 years, doubled again in the next 250 years, and in the succeeding 150 years, doubled again. Since then, it has doubled in 45 years, 25 years, 15 years, and today is estimated to double every 12 months, with IBM projecting that the internet build-out will lead to a doubling every 12 hours. There are many contributing factors, and the observer is invited to build her or his own listing of them. Some that come to mind include human population nearing 8 billion, literacy nearing universality, formal education expanding, improving research protocols, reporting and reviews, global communication systems, etc. But undoubtedly, it is the computer and the advances in technology that serve as the conduit for knowledge expansion. The slides that follow provide a small expression of this phenomenon. This is the first slide demonstrative of accelerating growth in technology. It begins with the printing press and shows the rather rapid movement, particularly with the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, but also the quickness with which technology in the computer area has expanded from the late 1960s. Next slide. This rather busy slide examines the accelerating pace of change, the exponential growth of computing power, and the movement toward the time in which computer power surpasses that of the human brain and achieves equivalency to all human brains by 2045. The graphed line depicts hardware capacity to perform calculations per second for a $1,000 cost. Next slide. This slide presents a division of human knowledge into 4 areas: human creations, the physical world, the living world, and human beings. The use of a wide variety of technologies is central to each, central to advancing the individual bodies of knowledge and to the integration and harmonization of knowledge coming from each. At the same time, each category listed on the outer circle of the slide is made up of multiple divisions and subdivisions, specialties and subspecialties. Thus, the complexity of human knowledge is continuing to intensify and expand. The slide provides only a small idea of the enormity of the human body of knowledge that currently exists, and a beginning sense of the breadth of its expanse. New slide. Here we begin a series of slides that examine global forces breaking or amplifying current trends. These are referred to as disruptions in that they represent significant change with repercussions that are simultaneously cultural, societal, economic, and political. I will take time to acknowledge each element listed because of the extent of the anticipated disruption. Disruption number 1 is referred to as the age of urbanization. Populations will move in massive numbers from agrarian worlds to urban worlds, particularly in the emerging nations. This will lead to a shifting locus of economic activity and dynamism in the emerging markets and in cities within those markets. Nearly half of the business headquarters for the world's largest companies will be located in emerging markets, with China having more than America or Europe. 440 cities in emerging markets will account for nearly half of the global GDP by 2025. 2.5 billion people will live in Asian cities by 2025, nearly half of all global urbanites. By 2052, 46 of the world's 200 top cities will be located in China. 620 million people will have exited poverty in the last 20 years, and this movement from poverty will continue. The urban consumer class will see a 150% increase in its annual consumption in emerging markets from 2010 to 2030. Finally, emerging markets' share of the world economy will move from one-third today to one-half by 2025. Next slide, please. Disruption number 2 further elaborates ways in which the accelerating of technological change gives global access to the Internet via a range of Internet applications. The ability to make use of human knowledge extends to every corner of the world, and the applications of such knowledge further fuels opportunities and challenges faced by humans. This phenomenon underlines also the problem of being able to distinguish truth from falsehood, propaganda from fact, and in our time, the very serious problem raised by these difficulties. The last part of the slide identifies the disruptive technologies to watch and the estimated potential economic impact by 2025 of the mobile internet, the automation of knowledge work, and the rapid spread of internet applications in what is referred to as the Internet of Things. Next slide. Disruption number 3 examines the challenges of an aging world in 4 areas. The first looks at the proportion of elderly persons increasing in the period from 1950 to 2050. It is to be noted that in the advanced economies this proportion goes from 8% to 26% in that century, while in emergent economies it goes from 4% to a predicted 14%. Also noteworthy is the decline in the percentage of persons under 14 years of age. 27% in advanced economies declining to 16% in 2050, and in the emerging economies 38% in 1950 declining to a predicted 22% 2050. Meanwhile, global life expectancy is increasing to 76 years by 2050. This graying of the global workforce over 55 years of age increases from 14% in 2010 to 31%, more than doubles, in 2050. These realities, without productivity increases, will lead to a shrinking of GDP growth across the globe from 4% to a projected 1.8% in 2050. Technological change, it is hoped, will compensate for this decline. Finally, there is also much concern about the ever-increasing care costs of such an aging global population. Next slide. The fourth disruption examines the effects of greater global connections brought about by the rapid expanse of technology in global flows as expressed in trade, finance, people, and data in a 12 to 14-year period following the year 2000. Goods, services, and financial flows increased by 5 times, while the movement of people through international migration also increased by 5 times. In the area of data flows, 1.3 billion people monthly use Facebook, a number equal to the Chinese population. There was a 500 times increase in global online traffic in this period. Stock market volatility increased significantly in that the rolling average of the Standard & Poor's market exceeded 3 standard deviations on 3 days in 1980, and in 2014 it exceeded 3 standard deviations on 20 days. Next. Because of the busyness of this slide, it will be read in its entirety. The website listed at the top describes important disruptive technologies that will alter the way that businesses and entire industries operate. They are viewed as important developments in 2018. Artificial intelligence is now placed at the heart of business strategies. Personalized products and services aimed at satisfying individual consumer need will be given without cost or waste increase. A new wave of food producers creating meat-like foods that look, feel, smell, and taste like the real thing. Private data value platforms helping consumers take ownership of their own personal information. As a service business model triggering innovation in the reuse and remanufacture of goods. Sustainability increasing as a major future of innovation. Voice-based virtual assistants becoming more ubiquitous and directly linking companies and consumers. Continued movement toward the factory of the future. Blockchain technology more and more coming of age. Improved decision making with prescriptive analysis. Smart data discovery capabilities in particular are driving huge advances in which we understand unstructured and dark data. Dark data being unused or inaccessible data without applying advanced data analysis techniques. Growing interest and investment in gene editing technologies to allow research teams to alter, delete, and rearrange the DNA of nearly any living organism. The convergence of industries opening huge opportunities for organizations to evolve, offer new products, and service their customers. Diversity becomes a major boardroom issue, including a wide spectrum of age, education, gender, race, and sexuality. The cost of renewables is plunging faster than anticipated as the efficiencies of wind turbines and solar panels increase. This, coupled with huge advances in energy storage, will see the continued decline of fossil fuels. Each of the above is an area of studies in its own right. Next slide. As a conclusion to part one and the theme, where are we now? Several billions of humans are now living in an age of rapidly escalating change, fraught with challenges ranging from being the authors of our own destruction to the co-creators and determiners of our future. We live with the ever-increasing possibilities of greater health, wealth, and personal global fulfillment, while at the same time continuing tendencies to mutual annihilation. These realities lead to continually emerging value, moral, and ethical challenges. Are we now close to the pinnacle development of a species only recently able to see itself from a distance? A species becoming capable of leaving this small blue speck to explore billions of light years of universe, to populate and to continue to evolve. This brief look at where we are now leads to examining how we got here and the human knowledge challenges to our religio-cultural based stories of who and what we are. This is the end of part 1 and a transition to part 2.